Dirty diapers, lots of dirty diapers. Baby bottles with maggots in them. Sorry.
First responders had to use a shovel to get through the trash, feces, and animal remains.
The remnants of 3 infants have been found in the residence.
Investigators haven't said if the babies were full term or how they died, but police tell us 4 other children, ages 6 months to 13 years old, were living in the house in deplorable conditions.
The 6-month-old was in a filth condition. There was feces on the baby.
Gave us permission to take her children without any resistance.
There are some stories you hear and you can't help but think, this can't be real. How can someone actually do this? But this isn't just a fictional plotline meant to shock and entertain. This is real, and it happened in Blackstone, Massachusetts. In the shadows of an ordinary home, hidden away from the world, were skeletal remains. 3 infants, left to rot in forgotten corners. These weren't just bones. They were lives that had once been full of promise, abandoned by the one person who should have nurtured them. No birth certificates, no medical records. Officially, they never existed, but in reality they were very much real. This is the Blackstone House of Horrors, the disturbing truth of Erika Murray's life. A woman who, for over a decade, hid a dark secret. She lived in a house where filth didn't just pile up, it thrived, where the stench of decay became part of the air they breathed. And amidst the rotting food, the diapers stacked high, the human waste smeared across the walls, 2 living, breathing little girls were kept in their own personal prison. And just when you think it couldn't get worse, it does. How does a mother hide multiple pregnancies in plain sight? How do you deliver babies in your own bathroom, lock them away from the world, and still maintain the illusion of a normal life? How do you raise a family while hiding a whole other family in the shadows? This isn't just neglect. It's a story of control, of deception so deep it makes your skin crawl, of a woman who not only kept children hidden from the world, but also manipulated everyone around her, including the father of her children, the neighbors who chatted with her every day, and even her own kids who had no idea they were growing up in a house of secrets. But it wasn't until one single phone call from a neighbor, one that started with a cry of panic, that the house of lies began to crumble. And when it did, what police uncovered inside that house, even they couldn't believe their eyes. The truth that emerged was darker than anyone could have imagined. In fact, one of them almost vomited. This is the story of Erika Murray, a woman whose lies ran deeper than anyone could have guessed, whose ability to deceive the world, to make people believe her reality, turned a house into a graveyard with no headstones, no memorials, only forgotten children, whose only crime was being born. But before we continue, I just want to take a moment to thank you, my incredible viewers and subscribers. Your likes, shares, and thoughtful comments don't just support this channel, they help keep these stories alive. If you're new here, welcome. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and become part of this growing community that believes every story deserves to be told and no victim should ever be forgotten. Now, let's get into it. It was an ordinary afternoon until Betsy Brown's phone rang. August 27, 2014, was just another day in the quiet town of Blackstone, Massachusetts. But as soon as Betsy picked up, her world shifted. On the other end was her son, Pete, and he was crying, the sound of his sobs so raw and frantic it cut straight through the calm. "Mom, I can't get the babies to stop crying," Pete stammered, his voice shaking. Betsy's heart dropped. Babies? But Pete didn't mention any babies before. Nick, her son's friend, only had an older sister, Kayla. No babies. So what on earth was Pete talking about? "What babies, Pete?" she asked, trying to make sense of the words, but Pete couldn't explain himself. He just kept crying, panicking, begging her to come home. Without another thought, she grabbed her keys, jumped in her car, and sped toward the Murray house. As soon as she opened the front door, the first thing that hit her was the smell. It was thick, overpowering, like something was rotting inside the very walls. It felt as if the air was heavier here, soaked with decay. Her stomach lurched. This wasn't just a cluttered house. This was a house suffocating in filth. "Nick?" Betsy called, her voice shaky, but there was no response. She walked cautiously, stepping over piles of garbage and broken items, each step making the smell worse, the walls closing in on her. Nick, the boy she thought she knew, appeared at the top of the stairs, motioning her to follow. His face was blank, devoid of emotion. He led her upstairs, and with each step, the stench grew more unbearable, as if the house itself was alive and breathing its sickness into her lungs. Then, Betsy saw them, 2 little girls, locked in separate rooms. One was 3 years old, her small body trembling in a filthy mattress, her diaper swollen and leaking. Her eyes were wide and vacant, as if the world had left her long ago. The other was a 5-month-old baby, lying in a similar state, motionless, weak, her tiny body weighed down by neglect. Betsy took one look at them and froze, but then she saw something else, a dog, dead and decomposing by the baby's bed. How? Why? How could this be real? The whole scene felt like a bad dream, but it wasn't. It was reality, and it was happening right in front of her. Betsy stumbled backward, her head spinning. Her breath was short, her mind reeling. She couldn't process it, couldn't fathom how any of this could be happening. She ran outside, gasping for air, her mind racing to comprehend what she had just seen. Her hands shook as she dialed 911, the urgency in her voice barely masking her shock. "Help! There are kids locked away in there. They need help, right now," she managed to say, the gravity of the situation crashing down on her. The officers arrived soon after, led by Lieutenant Gregory Gilmore. As they entered the house, the smell hit them like a wall. Some officers gagged, others rushed outside, almost vomiting. The floors were barely visible beneath the clutter, and everywhere they looked there was decay. The kitchen sink was overflowing with rotting food, maggots crawled across the countertops, and rats scurried through the piles of filth. Then the officers made their way up the stairs, each step a journey deeper into the nightmare. And that's when they saw them. The children, now standing in the doorway, staring blankly. Kayla, 13, standing still, her eyes hollow. Nick, 10, expressionless, like he had given up on the world a long time ago. Lisa, the 3-year-old, rocking back and forth on her mattress, lost in a world of her own. Gina, the 5-month-old, barely able to cry, too weak to even make a sound. The children were taken out of the house, their lives changed forever. But there was no sense of relief. Not for the officers, not for Betsy. Not yet. When Erika arrived home, the indifference in her eyes shocked everyone. She didn't even flinch when she saw the police lights flashing. No panic, no tears. Her first question? About her cat. The officers, the investigators, all knew something then that couldn't be ignored. This wasn't just neglect. It was something much darker, something twisted, something that no one had expected. But this wasn't over. Just a week after the initial raid, September 3, 2014, the investigators were back, this time with a search warrant in hand. They knew what they'd already seen, but now they were digging deeper, seeking out a truth far darker than they could have imagined. The house was still the same, filthy, suffocating, the air thick with the stench of decay. But there was something more beneath the surface, something that hadn't yet been uncovered. And then they found it. One of the officers opened a closet, and what he discovered made his stomach turn. A backpack, just sitting there. But inside, the skeletal remains of a child. The decomposed body, so advanced in decay, looked almost gelatinous, like it had melted away, the skin and flesh barely recognizable. The officer froze, horrified, his breath catching in his throat. He didn't need to look any further to know that the nightmare was real, that the house had been hiding more than anyone could have imagined. But that wasn't all. No, there was more. In the next room, another officer uncovered 2 more bodies, each one a tiny, lifeless form. One was wrapped in a onesie, the umbilical cord still attached. The other, stuffed inside a box, barely recognizable. The horror was beyond anything these seasoned officers had ever experienced. The discovery of the remains wasn't just a gruesome shock, it was a shattering truth. These were children. Infants who never stood a chance. And the officers' faces said it all, their jaws clenched, eyes wide, struggling to process what they were seeing. For even the most experienced investigators, this was too much to bear. These weren't just bones. These were lives that had been erased, discarded, left to rot. The weight of the discovery hit hard. It wasn't just a tragic case of neglect anymore. This was a case of murder, of a mother's monstrous betrayal. They had her now. Erika Murray, the woman responsible for hiding these innocent lives, was finally in custody. The detectives wasted no time. They sat her down, the questions firing at her fast and cold. How did you hide multiple pregnancies in a house full of people? Her response? A simple shrug. I just did. The nonchalance in her voice sent chills down the detectives' spines. No panic, no remorse, just an emotionless response to the most horrifying questions imaginable. She didn't even flinch when they pressed her. Why didn't she call for help? Why didn't she seek medical attention when she gave birth alone in her bathroom? Again, her answer was chilling. I don't know. Over and over again. I don't know. This wasn't a woman who was scared. This wasn't a woman who cared. This was someone who had shut herself off from the world, from reality, from the consequences of her actions. And when the detectives asked her about her children, things took an even darker turn. They asked about Lisa and Gina, her daughters, who had survived the horrific conditions of that house. And Erika's response? She referred to Lisa, her own flesh and blood, as it. The complete detachment in her voice made it clear Erika didn't see these children as her own. They were nothing to her. Objects to be hidden away, ignored, abandoned. As the interrogation continued, Erika's responses were as chilling as ever, but the detectives couldn't help but wonder, was she lying? Or was she simply so detached from the reality of what she'd done that she truly believed the things she was saying? But the real story was unfolding in the hospital. Lisa and Gina, the 2 surviving children, had been taken to UMass Medical Center for examination. The results were nothing short of heartbreaking. Lisa, at just 3 years old, was terrified of any adult who came near her. Her eyes darted nervously, and when a doctor tried to approach her, she cowered in fear. It was as if she had never known safety, never known affection. She couldn't speak. She made no sounds save for guttural cries. She couldn't even eat like a normal child, unable to drink from a cup or use a spoon. The lack of sunlight, the lack of human interaction, everything she should have experienced as a young child had been stripped away. And the doctors soon diagnosed her with rickets, a condition caused by severe vitamin D deficiency, which left her bones brittle and deformed. Then there was Gina, just 5 months old. Gina wasn't much better off. Her head was flattened, a clear sign that she had been lying down for long periods, unable to move or interact with the world around her. She didn't react to voices or sounds. She was silent in a way no baby should ever be. But there was a glimmer of hope. After being placed in foster care, Lisa began to make incredible progress. Within 2 weeks, she took her first steps. For the first time in her life, she was learning how to walk, something so basic, yet so crucial to her development. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. For Lisa and Gina, the road to recovery would be long and difficult, but the fact that they were still alive and starting to heal was nothing short of miraculous. But before the nightmare at 23 St. Paul Street, there was a girl named Erika, shaped by years of control and isolation that set the stage for the horrors to come. Erika Murray was born in 1983 in Northbridge, Massachusetts, to Kevin, a mechanic, and Sharon, a homemaker. She grew up in a seemingly normal middle-class family. Her childhood was filled with summer vacations to Maine, backyard barbecues, and weekend trips that painted the picture of an ordinary, happy life. To the outside world, the Murrays were just another family, living the American dream. Their house had an above-ground pool, and Erika, the youngest of three, was a typical kid, running around the neighborhood with friends, playing baseball, and swimming until sunset. Life was easy, until it wasn't. At 16, Erika met 23-year-old Ramon Rivera. He worked at McDonald's, and their connection seemed harmless at first, but soon the 7-year age gap began to show. What started as innocent curiosity soon turned into control. Ramon wanted to know where she was at all times, who she was talking to, and what she was doing. He told her she didn't need anyone else. She had him. At first, Erika didn't mind. She thought it was sweet, but over time it became more suffocating. The control was subtle at first, asking about her day, who she was with, and where she had been. But that control quickly escalated. She stopped seeing her friends. She stopped talking to her family. Slowly but surely, Erika's world became Ramon's world. At 18, Erika was pregnant with their first child, Kayla. Her parents were supportive at first, but they noticed the changes in Erika. The young, outgoing girl they had raised seemed to disappear. She moved in with Ramon, cut ties with her family, and the isolation grew. She was trapped, emotionally dependent on Ramon and distance from everyone else. The life she had known was slipping away, and there was no one left to help her hold on to it. By 21, Erika was pregnant with their second child, Nick. They moved into a house at 23 St. Paul Street, which had once belonged to Ramon's sister, Christina, but once she moved out, it became Erika and Ramon's home. And this is where everything started to fall apart. The house became a symbol of their decaying relationship and the beginning of Erika's deeper isolation. Ramon made Erika quit her job, making her completely financially dependent on him. She had no money, no independence, and no way out. Erika, once a young girl full of life, was now a woman whose life was controlled by Ramon. He dictated what she wore, where she went, and who she spoke to. Her once vibrant life was now nothing more than a faint memory. The physical and emotional isolation took its toll, and Erika became trapped in a life she had never wanted. The house became her prison. She was isolated, with no one to turn to and no way to escape. Despite Ramon's firm instructions to avoid having any more children, Erika's body betrayed him. Time and again she became pregnant, hiding her growing belly under layers of oversized clothing. With each new pregnancy, her world grew smaller. She withdrew further, locking herself away from everyone, especially her family and friends, keeping the truth buried beneath fabric and isolation. Her body changed, but she could no longer hide the truth from herself. She was trapped in a cycle she couldn't break, each pregnancy weighing heavier on her already fractured psyche. The emotional toll on Erika was undeniable. She felt the walls closing in as the darkness of her secret life slowly consumed her, and with every new life that grew inside of her, she moved closer to the abyss. Each time Erika gave birth, she did it alone. No doctors, no nurses, no help, just Erika in the solitude of her bathroom with no one to share the burden or the pain, no one to call for help. The chilling image of her laboring in secret, her cries muffled behind closed doors, alone with her thoughts and the newborns she couldn't bear to show the world, is a haunting one. No medical support, no warmth of a hospital room. She was isolated, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally as well. Every birth was a private nightmare, a desperate act of hiding yet another child she couldn't or wouldn't bring into the light. To keep the lie intact, Erika went even further. She created a fake Facebook profile under the name Michelle Ridgway, a completely fabricated character who supposedly took care of the children Erika hid from everyone. By using this fake profile, Erika convinced Ramon and her older children that Lisa and Gina weren't really hers at all. They were just children she was babysitting. In a web of deception so tangled, Erika managed to keep her most precious secret, her children, hidden from the world, all while maintaining the illusion of a normal, happy life. The level of manipulation she was capable of, aided by Ramon's control over her, is chilling to consider. The fake profile wasn't just a lie, it was a weapon, a way to maintain the delicate facade of normalcy while her family remained in the dark about the horrors Erika was concealing. Then came December 16, 2014. It was a date that sent ripples through Blackstone, Massachusetts. On this day, Erika Murray was officially charged with 2 counts of murder, child abuse, and animal cruelty. The public watched, holding its collective breath, as the legal system began to unravel the horror that had been hidden behind the walls of 23 St. Paul Street. Prosecutors laid out their case with grim determination. Erika's negligence had caused the deaths of 3 infants, her own children, locked away in secret, forgotten by the world. The weight of the charges was almost too heavy to bear. For the public, it seemed like a slam dunk. The evidence was clear, the skeletal remains, the appalling conditions of the home, the children abandoned and starved. The case was presented as an open and shut tragedy, but little did the audience know, the truth was far from simple. The story that had captivated everyone was about to take a turn, one no one expected. And the prosecution came out strong, wielding the shocking evidence of the infants' remains. They painted a gruesome picture of Erika as the mother who let her children wither away in the filth of a death trap. They spoke of the cold, oppressive house, its walls stained with waste, the stench of decay that clung to everything, and the children, helpless, neglected, left to die in the isolation of their rooms. The prosecution didn't hold back, showcasing how Erika allowed her babies to suffer and die without a second thought. The neglect was blatant. The conditions inside that house were nothing short of a death sentence for those children. But Erika's silence, her refusal to act, was the most damning of all. How could a mother let her babies die like that? It was an emotional gut punch for the public, one that left everyone asking, how could this happen? But then came the twist, the defense. What they presented shook everyone to their core. They argued that Erika wasn't the cold-hearted monster the prosecution had painted her to be. No, they suggested she was a victim in her own right. They claimed she had suffered from severe mental illness, manipulated by her abusive partner, Ramon Rivera. The defense didn't mince words. They painted Erika as a woman trapped in a psychological prison, one where her mental state had deteriorated under Ramon's control. They argued she couldn't fully grasp the severity of her actions, that she was emotionally and mentally unable to act in the best interests of her children. The courtroom fell silent as the implications set in. Could it be that Erika was not a murderer, but another victim of the very system that had failed to protect her? This shift in the case left everyone on edge. Could Erika's actions truly be excused by her psychological condition, or was this just an attempt to avoid the consequences of a truly horrific crime? The trial was far from over, and this new development had set the stage for a much more complicated battle. So, Erika was evaluated by forensic psychologists who diagnosed her with 2 serious conditions: dependent personality disorder and avoidant personality disorder. These disorders made it difficult for her to assert herself or make independent decisions. But it didn't stop there. Erika also had severe short-term memory issues and cognitive deficits, all of which made her seem like someone incapable of understanding the gravity of her actions. This revelation took the case to a new level. Was Erika truly capable of understanding the consequences of her actions? Did she know the harm she was causing? Or was she simply too damaged, too controlled by her abuser to recognize the harm she was doing? The psychological evaluation injected a dose of doubt into the trial, one that made people question whether Erika should be held fully accountable for her role in the deaths of her children. But the psychological experts didn't stop there. They explained how Ramon's control over Erika had exacerbated her condition. The isolation, the manipulation, the constant emotional and psychological abuse that left Erika feeling powerless to make decisions or take action. Experts testified that Ramon's control had stripped Erika of her autonomy. He had isolated her from the world, kept her financially dependent on him, and psychologically incapacitated her from recognizing the severity of her actions. They argued that it wasn't just Erika's mental health that had failed her. It was the toxic, suffocating control that Ramon had over her life. The defense's strategy to paint Erika as a woman broken by abuse had taken root, adding layers of complexity to the case. Then came June 2019. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. The judge would deliver a verdict. But what came next stunned the courtroom. Despite the horrific nature of Erika's neglect, the murder charges were dropped. Prosecutors had failed to prove that the babies were born alive, and without that proof, they couldn't hold Erika responsible for their deaths. The verdict was a punch to the gut. Public outrage exploded. How could this woman, responsible for the deaths of 3 children, be allowed to walk away with such a light sentence? Erika was sentenced to 6 to 8 years in prison, but with the time she had already served, she would soon be free. How could this be? The law seemed to fail in its duty to deliver justice. And then came the deal for Ramon Rivera. He took a plea deal, admitting his role in the psychological abuse that had contributed to Erika's actions. He was sentenced to just 4.5 years in county jail. 4.5 years. Barely a slap on the wrist for a man who had psychologically destroyed a woman and contributed to the deaths of children. The public was furious. How could someone who had been just as responsible for the horror at 23 St. Paul Street face such a lenient sentence? Erika and Ramon had both caused irreparable damage, yet they both seemed to get away lightly. The outrage grew, with every new revelation about the case fueling the fire of public anger. The story of Erika Murray's trial was far from simple. As the legal battles continued, so too did the questions. Was justice really served? And for those who had witnessed the horror, the lasting emotional scars would never fade. The fight for justice may have ended in the courtroom, but for the people who had been affected, it was far from over. Then the house that had once stood as a symbol of pain, neglect, and death was finally torn down. The town of Blackstone watched as the once notorious building was reduced to rubble. Workers in hazmat suits scrambled to remove the toxic remains of the nightmare, clearing away the filth and the decay. It was a final act, an attempt to erase the horrific chapter that had unfolded behind those walls. But no matter how much they demolished or how much they cleaned, the memories, the screams, the horrors, the unimaginable neglect lingered in the air. The house was gone, but the scars on the town and the people who witnessed it would last forever. Then for the children, Kayla and Nick had made it out of that hellish house. They were alive, but their survival came at a steep price. Kayla was placed with her paternal grandparents, and Nick joined her there, each of them trying to piece together a life from the wreckage of their childhood. Kayla, so young when everything happened, carried the weight of her traumatic experiences in ways that most people could never understand. Nick, still a child, was dealing with a darkness that no kid should ever have to face. The emotional scars, invisible but deep, would stay with them forever. Yes, they were safe now, but the trauma was etched into their very souls, affecting every step of their journey toward healing. Then there were Lisa and Gina, the youngest survivors. They had suffered the worst. Born into a world of filth and neglect, they had been denied the most basic forms of care. Lisa, just 3 years old, and Gina, only 5 months, were in foster care, and experts feared the damage done to them was irreversible. The years of isolation, of being kept in locked rooms, of not knowing love or safety, these things left marks that no foster family could easily erase. Lisa couldn't speak, and Gina was too weak to even cry. Both children had experienced neglect so extreme that their futures were uncertain. The emotional cost of their survival was far too high. Even if they lived long, happy lives, the shadows of their early years would always follow them. Their story was a painful reminder of the lifelong damage caused by neglect and abuse, a story that would stay with those who knew them and with anyone who followed their heartbreaking journey. And though the legal system had spoken, the anger and frustration among the people only grew louder, making it clear that this case was about far more than just one woman. It was about the system that allowed such horror to unfold, and in the end, left so many unanswered questions. And that brings us to the end of Erika Murray's story, a chilling tale that exposes the darkness lurking behind the most ordinary of facades. The question remains, was justice truly served? Could we have done more to prevent this unspeakable tragedy? I want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story shocks you too, don't forget to check out other gripping tales of survival, justice, and the hidden horrors that too often remain in the shadows. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video so that these stories are never forgotten and the voices of the victims are heard. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.